Good day. We are going to talk about linking tables. Now, in your SQL code here, you'll see that there's a table called result and a table called student. And these two tables are going to be linked, and they are linked by one particular column, which is called student ID. And why they say they are linked is because one student has many results or marks. I'm going to show you a diagram here in Microsoft Access. That is a student table and that is the result table. So the student table has a primary key, that's what that little key is there, and then it's called student ID, and then the last name, first name, age, and house. Just like over here, student ID, last name, first name, age, and house. Then the result table has a primary called result ID, primary key, and then class name, student ID, and student mark. And we'll look over here. Can you see the table result has a result ID, which will act as a primary key, and then class name, student ID, and student mark. But student ID looks familiar. It actually comes from the student table. And that is because, if you look at this diagram, one student, and there's a little one there, can have many results for different classes. So we have to go and borrow student ID and put it in the result table so that we can have the tables linked. Now, to show you what the data looks like inside the table, first let's have a look over here. There's an insert into the student table that you're used to seeing that. All the rows get put in. What will that look like? It'll look like this. So there's the student table with all the data in. Student ID, which is the primary key, last name, first name, age, and house. So then we have another insert into statement over here where we're adding rows, 18 of them, into the result table. What was that going to look like? So I'll open the result table over here and you'll see that there are 18 rows, and this is what it'll look like after that query has been run. I mean, not query, that SQL statement here, the insert into, which is SQL statement, is inserting all of those rows into the result table. So it's the result ID, class name, student ID, and student mark. So there it is, result ID, class name, student ID, and the student mark. Now that student ID is going to say what student got what mark. So student ID number 2 is, if you look over here, student ID number 2 is Ron Weasley. Student ID number 8, that is student over here, Draco Malfoy. Excuse me. So let's move on. What are we doing here? We're going to look at how we can take data from two different tables and connect them. Well, that's, I've just showed you how we are connecting the table by using this student ID primary key over there and putting it into the result table. Yes, there's many over there. There's a lot of 1s, there's a lot of 2s, a lot of 8s, but the result ID is the primary key for the result table. And the student ID is the primary key for the student table. Now, the student table's only got things about itself in there. That's because the student ID, one student can have many results. So this is what we call the many side of a one-to-many relationship, and we put the student ID over here. We call it a foreign key. It's foreign because it's not about the marks, but it's about the student. But that is the way that we can link the two tables. So student ID in the one, student ID in the other, they are matching, and we will go ahead and look at this select statement here. So we want to see how all the students did in their end of term exams. So we want to display the first name and the last name and the marks, student mark. So take note, if you want to display the marks, we have to look at a different table called result. So we're going to get the first name from the student table, the last name from the student table, but the student mark comes from a different table As you can see, student mark is from the result table, and you can also see it over here. There's student mark over there. It's not in the student table, so we have to say result.student mark. Result table is where the student mark is from, but the first name and the last name are from the student table, so we have to type the table name dot and then the column heading that we are going to use. Then we are in our from section. We have to quote both the table names. Remember, the from is always which table we're working from. So in this case, because we're displaying from, or using in our select statement, which is display, we're displaying from both tables. We need to quote those table names in the from section, and then we have to quote the join of the two tables. In other words, this foreign key here, which is student ID, and student ID there. So student.student ID, result.student ID. Where those two are equal, we are displaying the names and the marks. We have to have this particular statement there if we're going to use two tables in the from section. Now, of course, here there's another condition here where the class name is Defense Against the Dark Arts. So that is that we only want to see that particular class. If you run this, we will see the students and their marks for that particular class. Defense Against the Dark Arts. I'm not seeing anybody else, only for this class. But we had to have in our where statement, we had to quote that we were using two tables and the student ID, which is common for both of those two tables. So let's have a look. Take the final query and change look at the herbology results. The final query. Right, so this particular query, they tell us here we want the first name and the student mark, and the where clause has to have the student ID quoted from both tables, and we're going to just basically use the same select statement here, and in question 1, it's easy. We're only looking for herbology, so we just change the name of the class. Herbology. It says take the final query and change it to look at the herbology. The final query is this one over here. And we want to look at herbology, so all you have to do is go and put that name in there in inverted commas, and that will be the answer for that question. So that was easy. Right, question 2. Now look at the results for all the 11-year-old students. So we want to see the marks for all the 11-year-old students. And now we're going to compile a whole different query all by ourselves without looking. So we want to see the marks. What do we want to see? We want to see the first name. So the first name comes from the student table, and the last name and the marks. Okay. Select. So we must say student dot first name. Well, we don't actually have to. Comma student dot last name, comma student. Hey, where are the marks? The marks are not here. They're not in the student table. The marks are not in the student table. They're in the result table. The reason why we have to have two tables here is because you know that students always have many different subjects, or classes in this case. Class name is basically a subject. So if you do many subjects, you have to be able to record the marks for all the subjects. That's why we have this two tables and the relationship. Anyway, back to our query. What are we displaying? The first name from the student table, the last name from the student table, and what else do we have to display? The results, in other words, the marks. And the marks are inside the result table, student mark. So we say result dot student mark, not student dot student mark, result table dot student mark. Right, we got that part. That's what we've always got to think about. What are you going to show? What are you going to display? And that's going to be in your select statement. Then you have to have a from statement. Which tables are these from? Well, we can see straight away, student and result. So the result table is where we've got the student mark, first name and last name. We've got that from the student table. So student table, comma, result table. Okay, don't worry about that highlighted there. That's because the result is a bit of a reserved word, but it still works, so we're fine. We'll keep it there. Right, student and result. Those are the two tables that we are displaying from. And as soon as we know that we're going to display from two different tables, or we're using columns from two different tables, we have to quote the join between the two tables. In other words, the common field, or how can we call it? The column heading, the common, the one that's the same in both the tables, which if you look at the diagram, student ID is there and student ID is there. If you look at the code here, we'll see that student ID is in this table and student ID is in this table as well. So student ID is in both these two tables. We have to quote that. In other words, say in our where statement, say where student dot student ID equals result dot student ID. But on top of that, we also want to show only the children that are 11 years old. So that's another criteria where we have to say age equals 11. Now, can we say age equals 11 without putting student in front? Actually, we can. We do know the age column is in the student table. There it is. I could have just quoted the age there without putting student.age in, but we'll keep it like that and run it. So, what are we looking for? The marks for everybody that are 11. I could have just gone and put age in as well, just so that we can see it. So we can see that it definitely is 11. Oops, something happened there. Sorry about that, folks. Okay, there we go. Right, so now we're done. And those are those two questions. Try that by yourself.